The Glimmerbrook Hollow Holiday Hunt. In the very heart of the Whispering Woods, where the streams giggled over smooth stones and the moss grew thick and soft, there was a place called Glimmerbrook Hollow. And in the coziest, neatest burrow in that hollow lived a badger named Barnaby. Barnaby loved holidays, but more than the holiday itself, Barnaby loved the planning. His burrow was a masterpiece of organization. His pantry was stocked with jars labeled in his finest script: acorns toasted, berries dried, summer, mushrooms sliced, sorted. For him, the perfect holiday meant a perfect plan executed in perfect peace and quiet. This year, Barnaby's plan for the Autumn Equinox Feast was his best yet. He had a schedule pinned to his wall with a perfectly sharpened twig. At 10 o'clock, he would polish the acorn cap candlesticks. At 11, he would arrange the leaf-patterned napkins. At noon precisely, he would sit down to a silent, solitary, and perfectly arranged meal. He sighed with contentment, adjusting a pine cone centerpiece a fraction of an inch to the left. It was going to be simply perfect. But little did Barnaby know his perfect quiet was about to be thoroughly, completely, and messily interrupted. For on the other side of the Glimmerbrook, in a much less tidy but far more lively part of the woods, lived others. There was Squeak, a little mouse with more energy than sense; Pip, a clever rabbit who could build anything out of sticks and string; and Waddle, a young owl whose curiosity was far bigger than his wingspan. They had also been planning for the holiday, but their plans involved something much grander than a quiet meal. They were planning the first annual Glimmerbrook Games. Just as Barnaby was dusting his last candlestick, the first sound hit him. It was not a woodpecker. It was a loud, happy, and very shrieky sound of pure delight, followed by a tremendous splash. Barnaby's ears twitched. He froze, his polishing cloth hovering in midair. That was not on the schedule. The sound was followed by another and another. Giggles, whoops, and the thumping of many small feet running far too fast. Barnaby crept to his doorway and peered out. His neatly raked path of smooth pebbles was now scattered with muddy footprints. His prized patch of velvet moss had a distinct dent in it, and over by the brook he saw them. Squeak, Pip, and Waddle were jumping from a low-hanging branch, landing in the water with joyous, splashy leaps. Barnaby felt a hot prickle of annoyance travel from his nose to the tip of his tail. This was a catastrophe. This was chaos. This was messy. His peaceful holiday was ruined. He ducked back inside, his heart pounding not with fear, but with frustration. What were they doing? Why here? Why now? He decided he had to investigate. This was no longer about enjoying his feast. It was about understanding the enemy, this thing called noisy fun. He had to find out what they were really up to. Perhaps if he understood it, he could stop it. So Barnaby the Badger became Barnaby the Detective. He peeked from behind a large friendly oak tree. The three friends were now out of the water, shaking themselves dry and laughing. Pip the Rabbit was holding up a long twisty vine and pointing to a high branch. Squeak the Mouse was jumping up and down with excitement, and Waddle the Owl was nodding his head very seriously, as if agreeing to a grand plan. Barnaby was puzzled. This wasn't just mindless splashing. They were planning something. But what? He watched as Pip, who was an excellent climber, scurried up the tree trunk with the vine in his mouth. He looped it expertly over the branch and climbed back down. Soon all three were taking turns swinging on the vine, Tarzan style, over the brook and letting go with another triumphant splash. Barnaby's first clue was found after they had run off, giggling and heading deeper into the woods. He crept over to the swing tree. There, on the ground, was a single bright red feather. It was too big for Squeak, too small for Pip. It must have come from Waddle's chest. Barnaby picked it up. It was a clue, evidence of their disruptive activity. He tucked it carefully into his apron pocket. The hunt was on. The sounds of the trio led him on a merry chase. He heard more laughter from the direction of the sunny meadow. Barnaby stuck to the shadows, moving with a silence that would impress a fox. He peered through a thicket of tall grass. His detective eyes saw a scene of utter madness. They were rolling down the big hill in the meadow, over and over, their legs and arms flailing. They would get to the bottom, dizzy and grass-stained, and then immediately run to the top to do it all over again. Barnaby simply could not compute. What was the objective? Where was the point? It seemed like a spectacular waste of energy. But then he saw it. As Squeak tumbled past, a small shiny object fell from her pocket. Barnaby waited until they were all at the top of the hill again, took a deep breath, and darted out to retrieve it. It was a smooth white quartz stone, worn by the stream, with a little yellow smiley face painted on it. Another clue? He pocketed the stone. This was proof of their presence, but he was no closer to understanding the why. The final stop on the noisy tour led Barnaby to the old abandoned badger set at the edge of the woods. This was his least favorite place. It was dusty, disorganized, and full of cobwebs. The sounds coming from within were different now. Not whoops and splashes, but a concentrated, busy kind of sound. A scraping, a rustling, and low, excited murmurs. Barnaby's curiosity finally overpowered his annoyance. What in the world could they be doing in that dirty old place? He crept right up to the entrance and dared to peek inside. The sight that met his eyes made him gasp so quietly only he could hear it. The old set was transformed. Pip had used old spider silk and twigs to hang gleaming beetle shells from the ceiling like fairy lights. Waddle had used his wings to fan away all the dust and cobwebs from one corner, making it smooth and clean. And Squeak was carefully arranging a whole collection of beautiful things on a flat stone, a pink shell, a few vibrant orange leaves, a handful of bright red berries, and in the center a perfect tiny pie made of crushed seeds and berry juice, clearly baked in the sun. It was a feast, but not a neat, solitary, scheduled feast like his. It was a wild, beautiful, shared feast of found things. And then he heard them talking. Not with words he could understand, but with feelings he suddenly could. Pip chittered with pride about finding the biggest beetle shell. Squeak squeaked with excitement about the secret berry patch. Waddle gave a soft, happy hoot, placing the smiling quartz stone Barnaby had found right next to the little pie. They weren't just making a mess. They were working together. They were building something. They were sharing. Barnaby's heart gave a funny little squeeze. He looked at the messy, glorious, colorful display. He looked at their happy, expectant faces as they admired their work. He thought of his own perfect, polished, lonely feast waiting for him back in his silent burrow. For the first time, his perfect plan felt small and very, very quiet. He must have made a sound, a sniffle or a shuffle of his feet, because 3 pairs of eyes suddenly turned and saw him there in the doorway. There was a moment of terrified silence. The mouse, rabbit, and owl froze, surely expecting a scolding from the grumpy, tidy badger they'd been avoiding all day. But Barnaby didn't scold. He slowly stepped into the old set, ignoring the dust on his paws. He looked at their little feast, and then he reached into his apron pocket. He pulled out the bright red feather he had found and gently placed it beside the smiling stone. Then he reached into his other pocket and pulled out his own contribution, a small, perfect jar of his very best honey clover sweet. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Squeak let out a delighted squeak. Pip's nose wiggled with happiness. Waddle gave a wise approving blink. Barnaby's hunt was over. He hadn't found the source of messy fun. He had found the source of joy. And it wasn't in quiet order. It was in shared laughter, in working together, in the beautiful, messy, colorful chaos of friendship. His holiday wasn't ruined after all. It had just become a different kind of perfect. A better kind. And as for what surprising adventure might happen next holiday, well, rumor has it Barnaby is already planning a spectacularly messy treasure hunt for his new friends. But that is a story for another time. Moral, the greatest joy is often found not in perfect plans, but in the messy shared adventure of friendship.